Thor Ragnarok is one of my 3 favorite movies in the entire MCU. It pulled me back into a franchise I'd basically stopped caring about, right when I needed a reason to. So when Love and Thunder got announced, same director, same lead, coming off one of the best character reinventions in blockbuster history, I was sure about what I was getting. Instead, it became my most hated movie in the entire MCU. Out of everything Marvel has put out, this is the one I can't stand. Most explanations for why this movie failed land on the jokes. Too silly, too much, Waititi lost the plot chasing a laugh. That explanation has a hole in it. Ragnarok is funny too. Ragnarok might be the funnier movie. So why did the jokes in one protect the story, and the jokes in the other bury it? The real answer sits in a screenplay that was heavily reduced during development and editing, then handed to a director whose own comments suggest he wasn't especially invested in saving what was left of it. Too silly is the complaint everyone lands on, and it's missing the actual mechanism. Ragnarok is packed with jokes too. Plenty of other movies mix comedy with real stakes and land both. Guardians of the Galaxy does it, Hot Fuzz does it, Everything Everywhere All at Once might do it better than anything released in the last decade. The difference sits in who the jokes are aimed at. In Ragnarok, Thor is the straight man. He's a god dropped onto a garbage planet, forced into the gladiator ring by a ruler who treats war as entertainment, alongside a talking rock built like a walking mountain. And the comedy comes from his dignity colliding with a universe that refuses to take him seriously. He's the joke's target, not its source. When Hela shows up, or Asgard actually falls, the jokes stop. The film knows the difference between comedy happening around Thor and comedy happening to the story. Love and Thunder flips that. Thor isn't reacting to an absurd universe anymore. He is the absurd universe. The one who blows up a sacred temple mid-rescue and grins about it. The one negotiating peace with his own axe. A joke aimed at a character from the outside asks the audience to laugh with him while still trusting him to carry the story. A joke coming from inside him asks the audience to stop taking him seriously at all. Ragnarok never asked that question. Love and Thunder asks it constantly, and every time it does, it spins a little more of the trust the story needs later, once it actually wants you to care. It shows up in the small moments too. Screaming goats interrupt real dialogue because goat screams were funny on the internet a decade ago. Zeus spends his screen time fussing over the guest list for his annual orgy, while a man who murders gods for a living is actively hunting his entire pantheon. Neither beat connects to anything around it. They just sit there, taking up space where tension should be building instead. There's a word for this trick: bathos. Alexander Pope coined it in the 1700s, for the move of sliding from something serious straight into something ridiculous with no warning. Used carefully, it punctures a scene that's taking itself too seriously. Used the way this movie uses it, it punctures every scene, including the ones that needed to survive. The reason that matters here is about training, not taste. Repeatedly undercutting a serious beat with a punchline teaches the audience that nothing on screen is actually at risk, that the next scary or sad moment is probably a setup for another joke. By the time this movie needs you to sit with a dying woman or a kidnapped child, it has spent 2 acts training you not to. The movie spent its own runtime making sure nobody would. Ragnarok actually staged a play about this exact idea. Asgardian actors perform Loki's fake death on a real stage, and it's genuinely funny because it's doing double work, mocking Loki's vanity while roasting how self-serious the Dark World took itself, all while the in-universe audience watches it completely straight-faced. Love and Thunder stages a play too, recreating Hela's arrival and Odin's death. And this time, the actor playing Odin just crawls off stage, while the actor playing Loki squirts himself in the face with a water bottle to fake crying. Same device, 2 movies apart. One earns its laugh doing double duty. The other exists purely to get the laugh. Watch how fast that habit catches up with the movie somewhere it actually costs something. Children get kidnapped and dragged into a shadow realm by a killer with a cursed living blade. Minutes later, the film's inside Omnipotence City, and Zeus accidentally strips Thor naked in front of a room full of gods who all swoon like it's dinner theater. The gag lands fine on its own. Positioned seconds after a hostage crisis involving children, it erases whatever stakes the kidnapping was supposed to carry. This traces back to what happened to the person standing at the center of it. Thor spent a decade earning this ending. Arrogant prince in 2011, humbled protector by the first Avengers, a grief-stricken king by Ragnarok, and then Infinity War and Endgame push him past all of it. Parents gone, brother gone, best friend gone, An entire planet of his own people gone. He loses everything. And somewhere in that pile of loss, he actually grows from it. He hands the throne to Valkyrie. He leaves to find out who he is without a crown. That's a real arc, closed properly. The kind most franchises never bother finishing. Love and Thunder throws it out in the first 10 minutes. The script tries to explain the regression as a defense mechanism, Thor closing off his heart so grief can't reach him again. That's a fair premise for a character who's lost everything, and it's the kind of premise that could genuinely work. A guarded, colder version of the man. Someone who flinches away from connection because connection is what keeps costing him everything. An arc exists for a reason beyond giving a character somewhere to go. It's what tells an audience their investment across a decade of movies actually meant something. Undo it without a real cause, and you're telling them the last movie didn't count. The problem is what closing off his heart actually looks like on screen. He's fighting alongside the Guardians, wrecks a temple belonging to the people he's supposedly there to protect, and instead of registering any of it, grins at the wreckage and calls it another classic Thor adventure. When Gorr actually takes the children, an entire generation of New Asgard vanishing into a shadow realm, Thor tries to comfort them through a magic projection, and the scene plays it for laughs. He gets tickled. He acts the fool. A kidnapping the movie is supposedly building its whole plot around gets treated like a bit. Later, Sif turns up in the snow, missing an arm, bleeding out. This is his oldest friend, and the scene he gets with her is Thor arguing over the technical requirements for getting into Valhalla, like she's filing a claim instead of dying in front of him. If you spent this movie feeling like you were watching a stranger wearing Thor's face, this is why. The man who spent a decade learning what loss actually costs him doesn't recognize loss anymore. He's gone soft in the head, and the movie plays it as charm. Chris Hemsworth said as much himself later in Vanity Fair. He talked about getting swept up in the improvising and the wackiness on set, said he became a parody of himself, said he didn't stick the landing. That's the guy playing the part, on record, agreeing the character got away from him. Then there's the axe. Stormbreaker gets written as jealous, sulking every time Thor looks at his old hammer too long, and Thor spends real screen time apologizing to a weapon like it's an ex he's still texting. Once that's a gag, the movie keeps returning to it until it stops being a joke about Thor and starts being the only thing Thor seems capable of taking seriously. By the climax, that same blind spot gets handed weapons of its own. Thor gives his power to the kidnapped children so they can fight Gorr's shadow monsters directly, arming kids in a battle instead of getting them out of one. The movie frames it as clever. It's the same obliviousness he opened the film with, just aimed at somebody smaller this time. The person in this story who's supposed to make him question any of it barely gets the chance to. So, if you're still with me, hit like and subscribe. Genuinely how a channel like this stays alive. Alright, let's get back to the video. Christian Bale plays this role like he wandered in from an entirely different, much darker movie. And for the few minutes he's fully lit and given room, he's the best thing in it. Grief and menace living on the same face. The kind of performance a comic book movie almost never earns. Honestly, he's the reason I stuck it out. A villain earns his place in a story by being the argument the hero has to answer. An actual position. One the hero has to either defend against or admit has a point. That's what makes a climax feel like more than a fight. It's two answers to the same question, colliding. In the comics, Gorr threatens more than Thor's body. He threatens his worldview. He drags Thor into an argument he can't win cleanly, that gods take worship and give nothing back, that the universe would run fine without them. And it shakes Thor hard enough that he starts doubting whether he deserves to lift his own hammer. That's the version of the character built to actually change the hero. It only works if the movie lets the question land. The movie sets that argument up, and then refuses to let Thor actually sit inside it. He walks into Omnipotent City, watches Zeus and an entire pantheon behave exactly as vain and useless as Gorr claims all gods are, and just leaves. That's the exact moment the argument was built to force. Gods proven rotten in front of the one god who has to decide what that means about himself. And the movie just walks past it. He doesn't wrestle with any of it. He steals a thunderbolt and moves on to the next scene, like nothing he just saw applies to him. Screenwriting has an old rule for exactly this problem. Show, don't tell. Gorr is supposed to be a threat you feel in your chest. Instead, you're told he's dangerous while the movie keeps finding reasons to point the camera somewhere else. The detail that gives the whole thing away is simple. He's called the God Butcher. Across the entire runtime, he kills exactly one god on screen, in the opening minutes, and it's his own. Even what's left in the theatrical cut got softened. Bale has said scenes involving real self-mutilation and a genuinely disturbing scream were cut to keep the film family-friendly. The performance that could have justified the character's title got trimmed, for the same reason everything else in this movie got trimmed. The comics needed 3 versions of Thor from different points in time working together just to match Gorr's power. The movie needed a cosmic wish and 1 emotional speech. That gap tells you how much weight got left on the floor. It happens again, in a different key, with the person in this movie who's actually dying. The same refusal to let something matter follows her all the way to the end. In the comics, Jane Foster earns Mjolnir the same way anyone does. She's worthy on her own, cancer and all. And the hammer answers because of who she is. There's a cruelty built into that version too. Every time she lifts it, the same magic that turns her into Thor also purges the chemotherapy keeping her alive. Every heroic act speeds up her own death. That's the actual tragedy the source material built. Sacrifice with a price tag attached to every single win. The movie can't leave that alone. It adds a scene where Thor, years earlier, tells the hammer to always protect Jane. The reason it reassembles for her turns out to be an old command Thor left running from a relationship that had already ended. The one part of this story that could have belonged entirely to her gets rewritten so a man is still in charge of it. Her cancer gets the same treatment as everything else in this script, which means it barely gets to exist as cancer. She's gaunt and exhausted in the scenes where she's out of costume, and the film can't sit in that for more than a minute before rushing her back into the suit, cracking jokes, sparring with Thor like none of it is actually happening to her body. Earlier in the film, Star-Lord tells Thor it's better to love and lose than stay closed off. The script holds on to that line. It spends the rest of the runtime building Jane's death to prove it right. For him. There's a term for what happens to her next. Fridging. A female character gets killed or badly hurt purely to give the man near her something to feel. Audiences pick up on this even when they can't name it. A death lands as tragedy when the story has spent real time treating that character's wants and choices as the actual point. The moment a death exists to complete someone else's arc instead, something in the audience quietly clocks that her interior life was never what the movie cared about, and the scene stops working as grief and starts working as plot mechanics with a funeral attached. In the comics, Jane gets an actual hero's death, sacrificing herself to save an entire city from falling into the sun. Her call, her consequence, hers to own. Then she dies here, and what her death is actually for becomes obvious. Her death exists to open Thor's story more than it closes her own. The mid-credit scene confirms it, showing her arriving happily in Valhalla, so nobody in the theater has to sit with what just happened for more than a few minutes. This reads like triage. Marvel had just watched Eternals flop critically as an overlong, sprawling epic. What happened next has never been officially confirmed by the studio, but it's been widely reported. A push to bring the next Thor film in under 2 hours, no matter how many gods needed killing. The theatrical cut lands at 1 hour and 59 minutes, 11 minutes shorter than Ragnarok. The 4-hour assembly cut before that trim is confirmed by the people who made the film. Waititi and Hemsworth have both talked about it themselves, on the record. Somewhere between 4 hours and 2, this movie lost most of its evidence. Gorr's actual slaughter of the gods, the thing his own title promises, got cut down to the single kill in the opening minutes. Jane's illness, the version with room to actually breathe, got trimmed into the rushed montage that made it into theaters. Jeff Goldblum, Peter Dinklage, and Lena Headey all shot scenes that never made it into the runtime at all. Simon Russell Beale, cast as the god Dionysus, got cut down to 2 lines despite keeping an above-the-line credit, proof of how much bigger his part used to be. That part is on the studio. A 2-hour ceiling doesn't leave room for 2 tragedies and a cosmic road trip, and the film that survived the cut shows exactly what got sacrificed to fit under it. The part that isn't on the studio is what happened to the 2 hours it did keep. Jennifer Caton Robinson, the co-writer, has described nights spent typing new dialogue into a laptop after a table read blew up whatever pages existed the day before. She's described standing in a dirt trench during blocking, one hand on the keyboard, rewriting scenes while Chris Hemsworth and Chris Pratt stood there, waiting to hear what they were about to say. Waititi calls this plussing, adding jokes to a scene until it's overflowing. It worked on Ragnarok because that film had Eric Pearson's finished screenplay underneath it, a spine the improvising could hang off of. This film had a 2-hour runtime, and a process built to blow past whatever pages existed that morning. No spine underneath any of it. Improvisation works best when it has something fixed to push against. A scene with a locked objective and stakes that already exist before anyone starts riffing. Take that skeleton away, and improvisation just multiplies, scene after scene, without anything ever actually getting decided. Waititi has been fairly candid about how he got into this franchise in the first place. When Marvel first called about what would become Ragnarok, his first Thor film, he said he had no real interest, called the offer the bottom of the barrel of his own career ambitions, and took it because he was broke and had just had a second kid. He's admitted he'd read around 18 pages of the source comics before that. That mindset produced one of the best movies in the franchise anyway, because Pearson's screenplay gave him something solid enough to improvise on top of. Love and Thunder gave the same mindset, nothing to catch it. Hemsworth backed this up too later, telling GQ the production had too much fun, that it got too silly, admitting even his own kids' friends picked apart the effects and the jokes. When your lead is publicly agreeing with the exact criticism the film received, the excuse that critics just didn't get it stops holding up. This part is Waititi's alone, both times. Only one of those two films had something in place to catch him when he wasn't fully there. That's the failure, stated plainly. A screenplay heavily reduced before a camera rolled, written by a process built to abandon its own pages daily, overseen by a director who wasn't especially attached to what he was making in the first place. The tone, Thor, gore, Jane. 4 wounds, same knife. Neither failure alone had to be fatal. A tight runtime can still produce a sharp film if the pages surviving the cut were locked before the cameras rolled. A loose, improv-heavy process can still work if there's enough time to let scenes breathe and find their shape. Love and Thunder got a hard ceiling on time, and a process built to spin that time, chasing whatever joke felt funniest that morning. And the two failures multiplied each other instead of just adding up. The strange part is the movie already built itself an alibi for exactly this kind of mess, and hands that alibi to a character too gentle to actually carry it. I went looking for an explanation for why this movie felt like this, and the internet handed me the Korg theory almost immediately. The whole story is narrated by Korg, telling a bedtime tale to a group of alien kids, and a rock monster with a gentle brain is exactly the kind of narrator who'd soften the violence, exaggerate the heroics, and turn a horror story into something safe enough for children. Under that reading, the tone problems become Korg's choices, baked into how he tells a story. It's a clean theory. It even explains a few things. The toy-bright color of Thor's armor, the way Stormbreaker acts like a sulking child, why the gods in Omnipotence City look more like a costume party than a pantheon. It doesn't survive the theater seat, and the reason goes deeper than exhaustion. Real unreliable narrators get flagged as unreliable inside the story itself. A visual tell, a contradiction the film lets you catch. A final reveal where the lie and the truth sit side by side and you feel the gap open up. The way Fight Club or The Usual Suspects pull the rug out from under you. That's a choice a filmmaker makes on purpose, built in before a single frame gets shot. Korg's unreliability never gets that signal. Nobody inside the movie flags it. Nothing on screen contradicts his version of events. The theory showed up after release, built by people trying to make sense of a film that didn't hold together. The film never built that defense into itself. And the movie doesn't even commit to its own excuse. Korg gets hit by Zeus's lightning midway through and reduced to a floating, disembodied head, a moment that could have actually let something land with weight for once. Instead, it's played for a laugh within seconds, because this script never learned how to let a serious beat survive contact with itself, not even when it's happening to its own narrator. Korg worked as a character in Ragnarok precisely because he showed up in small doses. Promoted to full-time narrator here, the same voice that used to land as a nice break from the plot becomes the whole texture of the film, and what worked in inches suffocates at full length. A movie that has to build itself an alibi for its own mess is still a movie that needed one. Ragnarok had a finished screenplay underneath everything Waititi improvised on top of it. Love and Thunder had a laptop, balanced on Jennifer Caton Robinson's knees, in a dirt trench, open to a scene that didn't exist yet, while the actors stood a few feet away, waiting to hear what they'd actually be saying. That's the whole movie, sitting in one image. A screenplay trying to write itself into existence, while the scene was already being blocked, on a clock that ran out before it ever had the chance. If you want more of my take on Marvel, there's another one right here.